Article 7, Section 5, Operation of Salary Cap. As a basic rule, a team's salary may not exceed the salary cap at any time unless they're using an exception. Room. Any team with room may enter into a player contract that calls for a salary in the first salary cap year that would not exceed the team's then current room. Annual salary increases and decreases. The following rules apply to all player contracts other than qualifying vet free agents or early qualifying vet free agents and their prior team. For each salary cap year after the first cap year, the player's salary excluding incentive compensation may increase or decrease in relation to the previous cap year's salary excluding incentive compensation by no more than 5% of the salary for the first cap year. Regular salary may increase or decrease in relation to the previous cap year's regular salary by no more than 5% of the regular salary for the first cap year. In the event that the first cap year covered by the contract provides for incentive compensation, the total amount of likely bonuses in each subsequent cap year may increase or decrease by up to 5% of the amount of likely bonuses in the first cap year. And that's the same rule for unlikely bonuses, up to 5%. The following rules apply for qualifying veteran free agents or early qualifying vet free agents and their prior team. Now, a lot of this language is redundant when it comes to the salary that has incentive compensation or doesn't have incentive compensation, or likely bonuses or unlikely bonuses, regular salary, the increases. It's all related to the first year. And how those increases and decreases are calculated. So for the early qualifying vet free agents and the qualifying vet free agents, they're going to get increases of 8% as it pertains to increases or decreases of 8% as it pertains to the salary excluding incentive comp and the regular salary. That's 8% up or down. And then as it pertains to if it provides for incentive compensation, then the likely and unlikely bonuses will be 8% as well, increase or decrease. For extensions, all the rules apply for the extensions the same way, but these are for extensions that are not in connection with the trade. They're going to get for the 8% for all the above. And when it comes to extensions with trades, in connection with trades, they're going to be getting 5% for all the above. And when I say all the above, I mean salary excluding incentive compensation, the salary that involves incentive compensation via the likely and unlikely bonuses, and the regular salary for those subsequent years. Any bonuses that a player may receive pursuant to Article 2, Sections 3B, III, and 3C shall be added to the player's regular salary and excluded from his incentive compensation. The aforementioned rules do not apply to two-way contracts. The second year of the two-way contracts is going to equal the G League annual salary for that particular year. Performance bonuses. No player contract may provide for unlikely bonuses in any cap year that exceed 15% of the player's regular salary for that cap year at the time the contract is signed. Provided, however, that with respect to extensions, if the amount of unlikely bonuses in the cap year in which the extension is signed exceeds 15% of the player's regular salary for that year, the extension may provide for up to the same percentage of unlikely bonuses in the first year of the extended term. No renegotiation may provide for an increase in unlikely bonuses if after that renegotiation, the unlikely bonuses will exceed 15%. No player contract may provide for an unlikely bonus for the first cap year covered by that contract if included in the player's salary for that year will result in the team's team salary exceeding the room under which it is signing the contract. For the sole purpose of determining whether a team has room for new unlikely bonuses, the team room shall be deemed reduced by all unlikely bonuses and contracts approved by the commissioner that may be paid to all the team's players that entered into player contracts, including renegotiations during that cap year. No futures contracts. Every player contract must cover at least the then current season or the upcoming season in the case that the contract was entered into from July 1 through the prior day of the first day of the season. No team and player may enter into a player contract from the commencement of the team's last game of the regular season through the following June 30th. Teams are able to enter into amendments during this time frame where it's otherwise okay in this agreement. A player contract that covers more than one season must be for a consecutive period of seasons. A player who receives a required tender or a qualifying offer during the month of June may accept that required tender on the date he receives it. From February 1 to June 30th, a first-round pick may enter into a rookie-scale contract commencing with the following season, provided that as of or at any point following the first day of that regular season, the player was a party to a player contract with a professional basketball team not in the NBA covering that regular season. 6. Exceptions to the salary cap. Existing contracts. A team may exceed the salary cap to the extent of its current contractual commitments, provided that the contract satisfied the provisions of this agreement when entered into, or were entered into prior to the effective date of this agreement in accordance with the rules then in effect. Veteran free agent exception. Beginning at 12:01 p.m. Eastern Time on the last day of the moratorium period following the last season covered by a vet free agent's player contract, that player may enter into a new player contract with his prior team. If the player is a qualifying vet free agent, the new player contract may provide for salary and unlikely bonuses in the first cap year totaling up to the max amount provided for in Article 7, Section 7. If the player is a non-qualifying vet free agent, subject to Article 2, Section 7, the new contract may provide in the first cap year up to the greater of 120% of the regular salary for the final cap year of the player's prior contract, plus 120% of likely and unlikely bonuses called for in the final year covered by the player's prior contract, or salary plus unlikely bonuses totaling 120% of the then current minimum annual salary applicable to the player, or in the case of a contract between a team and its restricted free agent, the salary and unlikely bonuses required to be provided in a qualifying offer. It'll be the greater of one of those three. If the player is an early qualifying vet free agent, the new contract must cover at least 2 seasons, not including a season covered by an option year, and may provide in the first cap year up to the greater of 175% of the regular salary for the final cap year covered by his prior contract, plus 175% of likely and unlikely bonuses in the called for in the final year covered by that prior contract, or salary plus unlikely bonuses totaling 105% of the average player's salary for the prior year, or if the audit report for that prior year hasn't been completed, 105% of the average player's salary for the prior cap year as computed by substituting the estimated total salaries. And for the early qualifying vet free agent, it'll be the earlier of those 3. If an early qualifying vet free agent with 2 years of service receives an offer sheet, the player's prior team may use the early qualifying vet free agent exception to match the offer sheet. Disabled player exception. A team may sign or acquire one replacement player to replace a player who has, as a result of disabling injury or illness, is unable to render playing services, or a, quote, disabled player. An application for a disabled player exception may be made at any time from July 1 to January 15. The replacement player's contract may be for 1 season and provide for salary and unlikely bonuses for the cap year in which he signed, totaling up to the lesser of 50% of the disabled player's salary for that current year, or an amount equal to the non-taxpayer mid-level salary exception. The replacement player must have only 1 season remaining on his player contract, and the post-assignment salary for that cap year in which he's acquired may be up to the lesser of the aforementioned amounts, in either case, plus $100,000. The exception for disabling injury or illness shall expire on the March 10 following the date of the exception is granted. The determination of whether a player has suffered a disabling injury or illness is going to be made by a physician designated by the NBA. And in the event that the Players Association disputes the NBA physician's determination, the parties will immediately refer the matter to a neutral physician. The neutral physician, in the case that he is appointed, makes the final determination, which will be final, binding, and unappealable. The cost of the NBA physician will be by the NBA, and the cost of the neutral physician will be jointly carried by the NBA and the Players Association. If the player resumes playing for the team or is traded prior to the team's use of its exception, the exception shall be extinguished. And this is in regards to a player that is recovering from an injury or illness and ends up resuming play. The disabled player exception is available only to the team with which the player was under contract at the time his disabling injury or illness became known. If a team makes a request for an exception and that request is denied, the team shall not be permitted to make any subsequent requests unless 90 days have passed, and that subsequent request is based on a new injury or an aggravation of the same injury. Biannual exception. A team shall be permitted to use the biannual exception during a cap year only if the team's team salary at the time the exception is used and at all times thereafter during the cap year does not exceed the tax level for such salary cap year plus the tax apron amount, and at the time the exception is used, the team has not already used either the taxpayer mid-level salary exception or the mid-level salary exception for room teams in the same cap year. A team may sign one or more player contracts not to exceed 2 seasons in length that in the aggregate provide for salaries and unlikely bonuses in the first cap year, totaling up to the following. For the 2017-2018 cap year, the biannual exception was $3.29 million. And for every year after that and up to 2024, that exception amount is going to be adjusted by applying the percent increase or decrease in the salary cap from the preceding salary cap year to the current salary cap year. A team may not use all or any portion of the biannual exception to sign one or more new player contracts in any 2 consecutive salary cap years. Player contracts signed pursuant to the biannual exception covering 2 seasons may provide for an increase or decrease in salary and unlikely bonuses for the second cap year. The biannual exception, if applicable, shall arise on the first day of each cap year and shall expire on the last day of the team's regular season during that cap year. Non-taxpayer mid-level salary exception. Teams can use this only if their team salary at the time of use and at all times during that cap year doesn't exceed the tax level for that cap year plus the tax apron amount and haven't already used either the taxpayer mid-level salary exception or the mid-level exception for room teams in that same year. A team can use this exception to sign one or more player contracts during each cap year that don't exceed 4 seasons in length, that in the aggregate provide for salaries and unlikely bonuses in the first cap year that total up to, for the 2017-2018 season, $8.406 million, and for every other season thereafter up to 2024. This exception will be adjusted by applying the percent increase or decrease in the salary cap from the preceding cap year to the current cap year. Annual increases and decreases in the salary and unlikely bonuses will be via Section 5C1. If a vet free agent with 1 or 2 years of service receives an offer sheet, the player's prior team may use the non-taxpayer mid-level salary exception to match the offer sheet. This exception shall arise on the first day of each salary cap year and expires on the last day of the team's regular season during that salary cap year. Taxpayer mid-level salary exception. Teams are permitted to use this only if their team salary exceeds the tax level for such salary cap year plus the tax apron amount, and the team has not already used either the biannual exception non-taxpayer mid-level salary exception, or the mid-level salary exception for room teams, or acquired a player in a contract via Section 8E1 in the same cap year. Once a team has used the taxpayer mid-level salary exception during that salary cap year, they can't use any of the aforementioned exceptions or acquire a player via 8E1. A team may use the taxpayer mid-level salary exception to sign one or more player contracts during each salary cap year not to exceed 3 seasons in length in the aggregate that provide for salaries and unlikely bonuses in the first salary cap year totaling up to, in 2017-2018, $5.192 million, and for subsequent seasons up to 2024, it is adjusted by applying the percent increase or decrease in the salary cap from the preceding salary cap year to the current salary cap year. Increases and decreases, like in every other exception, are via 5C1, and it shall arise on the first day of the salary cap year and expire on the last day of the team's regular season during that cap year. Now, when a team uses non-taxpayer mid-level salary exception and the contract that they enter into with the player will not exceed 3 seasons, and it provides for salaries and unlikely bonuses in the first cap year that total no more than what's in the taxpayer mid-level salary exception amounts. And if it weren't for them using that non-taxpayer mid-level salary exception, they would be able to engage in activity that would allow them to exceed the tax level for that salary cap year plus the taxable amount. Then they will actually be deemed to have used the taxpayer mid-level salary exception instead of the non-taxpayer mid-level salary exception. And the team's ability to use the non-taxpayer mid-level salary exception will be extinguished. Mid-level salary exception for room teams. In the event that a team's team salary at any time during the cap year is below the salary cap for that year, such that the team is not entitled to use the biannual exception, non-taxpayer mid-level salary exception, or the taxpayer mid-level salary exception, and at the time the team proposes to use this mid-level salary exception for room teams, the team hasn't already used one of the aforementioned exceptions, then the team may use this exception for room teams to sign one or more player contracts that do not exceed 2 seasons in length, and in the aggregate provide for salaries and unlikely bonuses in the first cap year totaling for the 2017-2018 year $4.328 million, and for subsequent years through 2024 this exception is adjusted by applying the percent increase or decrease in the salary cap from the preceding salary cap year to the current salary cap year. Once a team uses the mid-level salary exception for room teams, then they're prohibited from using any other exception. Annual increases and decreases for salary and unlikely bonuses are via 5C1, and the mid-level salary exception for room teams shall arise on the date upon which the team's team salary falls below the salary cap and expire on the last day of the team's regular season during that cap year. Rookie exception. A team may enter into a rookie scale contract via Article 8, Section 1. Minimum player salary exception. A team may sign a player to or acquire by assignment a player contract that doesn't exceed 2 seasons in length and that provides for a salary for the first season equal to the minimum player salary applicable to that player with no bonuses of any kind. And also the second year in that contract provides for a salary with no bonuses of any kind equal to the minimum player salary applicable to that player. A team may, for a period of 1 year following the date of a trade of a contract to another team, replace the traded player with one or more acquired by assignment via these rules. A team whose post-assignment team salary would exceed the tax level for that cap year may replace that traded player or more replacement players whose contracts are acquired simultaneously and whose post-assignment salaries are no more than 125% of the pre-trade salary of the traded player plus $100,000. team salary, a team whose post-assignment team salary is equal to or less than the tax level for that cap year can replace a traded player with one or more replacement players whose post-assignment salaries for that year in the aggregate are no more than an amount equal to the greater of, the lesser of, 175% of the pre-trade salary of the traded player plus $100,000, or 100% of the pre-trade salary of the traded player plus $5 million, or 125% of the pre-trade salary of the traded player plus $100,000. So it says it's going to be the greater of, the lesser of those three options, whatever that means. I just had to go with it at a certain point. So those are the rules for if it happens simultaneously, the trade of the players. If the team's trade of a player and acquisition of one or more replacement players does not occur simultaneously, then the post-assignment salary or aggregate salaries of the replacement players may not exceed 100% of the pre-trade salary of the traded player at any time the traded player's contract was traded, plus $100,000. A team may aggregate the pre-trade salaries in two or more player contracts for the purpose of acquiring in a simultaneous trade one or more replacement players whose post-trade salaries in the aggregate are no more than an amount equal to, for teams whose post-assignment salary would exceed the tax level of that cap year, 125% of the pre-trade aggregate salaries of the traded players plus $100,000, and for teams whose post-assignment team salary would be equal to or less than the tax level, would be the greater of, the lesser of 175% of the pre-trade aggregated salaries of the traded players plus $100,000, or 100% of the pre-trade salaries of the traded players plus $5 million, or 125% of the pre-trade traded players' salaries plus $100,000. Now, that's one of those things, again, where it's the lesser, the greater of, the lesser of. You just got to go with it. No player contract acquired pursuant to an exception may, for a period of 2 months from the date of the player contract was acquired, be aggregated with any other contract for the purpose of a trade. So, for example, if a player was traded via an exception on December 20th, 2017, then the player's contract could not be aggregated with another contract for the purposes of a trade until February 20, 2018. So you have to wait at least 2 months. A team with a team salary below the cap may acquire one or more players by assignment whose post-assignment salaries are no more than an amount equal to the team's room plus $100,000. Now, in lieu of conducting a trade via this section, a team with a team salary below the cap may replace a traded player with one or more replacement players whose contracts are simultaneously acquired and whose post-trade salaries in the aggregate are no more than the greater of, the lesser of, 175% plus 100,000 of the pre-trade salaries, or 100% plus 5 million, or 125% plus 100,000. Or they can also aggregate the pre-trade salaries in two or more contracts for the purpose of acquiring in a simultaneous trade one or more replacement players whose post-trade salaries are no more than the greater of, the lesser of, 175% plus 100,000. The pre-trade aggregated salaries plus 5 million, or 125% plus 100,000. No player contract acquired via an exception, again, may for a period of 2 months be aggregated with another for the purpose of a trade. If a qualifying veteran free agent or early qualifying veteran free agent and his prior team enter into a player contract with an agreement to trade the contract, the team's team salary immediately following the signing is above the salary cap, and the new contract to be traded provides for a salary for the first season greater than 120% of the salary for the last season of the player's immediate prior contract, then for the purpose of calculating the assigner team's traded player exception, the player's salary shall be deemed equal to the greater of the salary of the last season of his preceding contract, or 50% of the salary for the first season of his new contract. If the player's immediately prior contract was a one-year contract that provided for a salary equal to the minimum player salary with no unlikely bonuses, the player's prior salary shall include the portion of the minimum player salary, if any, that was reimbursed out of the league-wide benefits fund. Now, for the purposes of calculating a team's traded player exception, a traded player's salary shall be deemed reduced by the unearned base comp that is not fully protected for lack of skill and injury or illness at the time of the trade. With respect to the assignment of player contracts occurring during January 10 through the last day of the regular season, a traded player's base comp for that season shall be deemed fully protected for lack of skill, injury, or illness. With respect to the assignment of contracts occurring during the day following the last day of the regular season through June 30th of that cap year, a traded player's salary will equal the lesser of the player's salary for the current cap year and the player's salary for the subsequent salary cap year, reduced by the amount of the player's unearned base comp that is not fully protected for lack of skill and injury or illness for the subsequent cap year at the time of the trade. Now, a good example of calculating, or how the team's calculating their trade player exception using those rules that we just mentioned. Good examples on pages 211 through 212. And it says that assume that a team wants to replace a traded player whose base comp and salary for the current and subsequent season is $8 million, and the base comp protected for lack of skill is $1 million in both seasons. If the trade of that player occurs on the day prior to the first day of the regular season, the traded player's salary for the purposes of calculating that traded player exception would be $1 million. $8 million of the player's salary reduced by $7 million, which is the amount of the player's salary that was unearned base compensation. So they just subtracted that $7 million via the rules and got $1 million for the trade player exception. Now, after 1 quarter of the regular season has elapsed, the traded player exception would be $2 million, which they got that from taking $8 million, the player's salary reduced by $6 million, which was $8 million multiplied by 75%, which is the amount of season that's left that was unearned base comp. And that's where they got that $2 million, which is basically a quarter of his full salary. On January 10, the traded player exception is going to be $8 million because it's $8 million, which is his full salary, reduced by zero, via the rule that said anytime between January 10th through the last day, the traded player's base comp is deemed fully protected for lack of skill, injury, or illness. If it's on the day following the last day of the current regular season, then the traded player exception would be $1 million, which is the lesser of $8 million, his salary, reduced by zero, which is the amount of the player's unearned base comp that is not fully protected, and $1 million, which is $8 million, the player's salary for the subsequent year, reduced by $7 million, which is the part that is unearned base comp. And the lesser of those two is $1 million. And just to clarify, at the time of this particular trade, which was a day after the regular season, the $8 million was his salary for that season, and he had earned all of his base comp. So that's why we reduced it by zero, because there was no unearned base comp at that point. And then for the subsequent year, the amount was $7 million that was unearned base comp that was not protected for lack of skill. Remember, we only have $1 million that's protected for lack of skill, just to further clarify that answer. None of the foregoing rules shall apply to two-way players. For example, a traded player exception will not arise from trading a two-way player, ever. Reinstatement. If a player has been dismissed or disqualified from the NBA and subsequently reinstated via the anti-drug agreement, the team for which the player last played may enter into a player contract even if the team has a salary that is at or above the cap, or that contract causes them to be over the cap. Non-aggregation. A team may not aggregate or combine any of the exceptions in order to sign or acquire one or more players at salaries greater than that permitted by one of the exceptions. If the team has more than one exception available at the time, they have the right to choose which exception they want to use to sign or acquire a player. Some other rules. A team is entitled to use any exception only if at the time the exception should arise and at all times until it's used, the team's team salary, excluding the amount of the exception, is at or above the salary cap or below the salary cap by less than the amount of the team's exceptions. In the event that one of the exceptions are used and at the time it arises, the team's team salary is below the cap by less than the amount of that exception, then the team's team salary shall include, until the exceptions are actually used or until the team no longer is entitled to use the exceptions, the amount of the exceptions. And the amount by which the team's team salary is less than the cap shall thereby be extinguished. When a disabled player exception is used, the replacement player's salary for the season covered by the contract instead of the amount of the exceptions shall be used in team salary. When a biannual, non-taxpayer, taxpayer, or traded player exception is used to acquire a player, the salary for the first season of the signed or acquired contract plus any then unused portion of the exception instead of the full amount of the exception shall be included in team salary. A team may at any time renounce its rights to use an exception, in which case the exception or unused portion of such will no longer be included in team salary. Now, the tax apron for the 2017-2018 year was $6 million, and the tax apron amount for subsequent cap years equals the preceding cap year's tax apron amount adjusted by applying 0.5% increase or decrease in the cap from the preceding year to the current cap year. A team's team salary for any salary cap year shall be adjusted as follows. It shall include all performance bonuses excluded from a player's salary, salary attributable to a contract signed by a free agent with 0 years of service or 1 year of service, any amount that could be added via the team salary adjustments. It shall exclude free agent amounts, provided, however, that as it pertains to restricted free agents, the salary shall include the greater of the salary plus unlikely bonuses via outstanding qualifying offers tendered, or the salary plus unlikely bonuses via any first refusal exercise notice. Team salary shall exclude amounts with respect to unsigned first-round picks and shall include the amount of any outstanding required tender to a first-round pick. It shall exclude the amount of any salary cap exception that is deemed included in team salary, and it shall exclude the amount of any incomplete roster cap hold amount added to the team salary. If a player is a vet free agent following the second or third season of his rookie scale contract, where the first option year or second option year was as applicable, to extend such contract was not exercised, then any new player contract between the player and the team that has signed him to his rookie scale contract may provide for regular salary, likely bonuses, and unlikely bonuses in the first cap year of up to the regular salary, likely bonuses, and unlikely bonuses, respectively, that the player would have received for such cap year had his first or second option year been exercised. Beginning January 10, each unused exception, other than the traded player exception, minimum player salary exception, and disabled player exception, shall be reduced daily throughout the end of the regular season by the amount of the unused exception as of January 10 multiplied by a fraction. The numerator is 1 and the denominator is the total number of days in that regular season. That concludes Article 7, Sections 5 and 6, pages 193 to 216, covering operation of the salary cap and exceptions to the salary cap. Happy studying. See you at the top.